Welcome to the Soul Forge, a place of silent mystery, quiet contemplation, and outright mayhem. Join your host, Sean Vanderloo, as he guides you through the adventures of living. Together, we'll talk about life and love, sex and dating, joy and heartache, memories and loss, and so much more. Don't worry, it's not nearly as pretentious as it sounds. Get ready for life, the universe, and everything on the Soul Forge.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Soul Forge podcast. I'm still your host, Sean Vanderloo. I've been going through the list of topics that I want to bring up on future episodes of the podcast. And after the overview of dating and the overview of my life, just brief histories of both of those topics, I was thinking it's probably time for a little bit of a lighter episode before we get into the big heavy stuff. So, what did I want to bring up this week? Well, I just figured that on this episode, I would talk about alternate titles that I could have used instead of Soulforge. And why am I doing that? Well, because it's interesting, because I had a lot of good ideas, and I thought if I told you some of these alternate titles, you might get a better idea of exactly what I'm trying to do here on the podcast. I'm not sure I've been as articulate as I would have liked to have been, explaining exactly the idea behind the show. It's kind of difficult to get your ideas out, tell you exactly what's going on here. I wish I could just do a memory dump mind transfer to you guys. But since I can't, I'm going to start on alternate titles. So when I first thought of this podcast, I thought, well, you know what? It's about being alive. It's about being human and being the best versions of ourselves. So what would be a good name for a podcast? How about the How to Be Human podcast? Like a primer or a guide on how to be a human, how to be the best person you can be, how to get along in society, how to live your life, how to make the best choices and the best decisions. How to be human. And then I thought maybe that's not the best idea. It's a fun title, but I'm not an expert. I'm not going to write a manual on how to be a person. So what if we change it to Mind Matters? Because the matters of the mind are important, and that's how you create your reality. So the Mind Matters podcast. That was in the lead for a bit after How to Be Human. And then I was thinking, well, let's put a positive spin on this instead. Let's make it more fun. Let's make it a little bit exciting. So that came up with two other titles that I had: a positive spin podcast and the happy medium. But a positive spin, it could have been about playing with tops or any kind of toy that spins, or fidget spinners and that kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, I don't want it to be so obscure that nobody gets it. And happy medium, well, that could just be about somebody who's like a psychic reader or whatnot. So that wasn't really going to work for me either. Although I think it would make a great band name. What do you guys think? The happy medium. And then lately, or for most of my adult life, I've had a goatee. But the last year, I've been experiencing or experimenting with beards. So I was thinking, what about the Bearded Soul podcast? But that might be too hipstery, and it wouldn't say exactly what the show is about. It was a neat image that I had in my mind for the artwork. It was going to be some kind of lumberjack looking guy, but didn't really suit my needs here for the show. Then I was thinking, how about the Healing Time podcast? It's time for us to heal. Let's get better. Let's be better people. But you know what? We're not necessarily sick, so we don't need to be healed. And I'm not a doctor, so that just didn't flow for me either. Although it was a nice idea. And then I had Soulfire, because I came across an image on my Instagram that there was a picture, and it looked like burnt. It was something burnt, and Soulfire was branded into some kind of image, and it looked like it was burnt and flamey, and it was pretty cool. And I thought the Soulfire podcast, which was really cool. I like it. I like the word soul for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's just the essentialness of who we are. But that didn't work. It wasn't quite good enough. Soulfire, what is that all about? It sounded like a game term actually, so I didn't go with that. And I said, well, let's keep moving forward on these ideas. We're going to get something. And then that's when it struck me, the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I could have an arrow and something like that. And that's basically the image. That's kind of the idea behind the show. We're moving forward. We're not looking behind us. We're not stuck in the past. It's not what's behind us that matters. It's what's in front of us. We have to keep moving towards the next goal. We can recognize what has come before us or what we've gone through already so that we don't go through those kind of things again. But we got to keep moving forward. We got to keep getting better and just go and go and go. So that was actually in the top three. I liked How to Be Human. I liked Keep Moving Forward. Then I thought, you know what? How about but I didn't want it to sound too pretentious, and so that's a big thing with me, I guess. I don't want things to sound too highfalutin or uppity or above my pay grade or whatever you want to call it, really. So the Pretentious Philosopher podcast. I like the image. And then I thought, well, what about the non pretentious philosopher? And it was just too many words, and it doesn't come out easy. It doesn't flow off the tongue. So the pretentious philosopher was out, the non pretentious philosopher was out. And then the other main one that was a runner up, and I think it was the best one other than Soulforge, was Life Garage. And I had ideas of, in the intro, like air guns and tools being dropped, and and those car lifts and air compressors and all kinds of things. And I had a great tagline. It was going to be something like "Life Garage, go fix yourself." I thought it was a fun image, and that's what we're trying to do. We're fixing ourselves. Not that we're broken, definitely not. While some of us might be, and I know I have been at times, but it's just to make us the best version of ourselves. And I kept coming back to the image of a lump of metal and the fire and the soul, and that's when Soulforge came to me. The essentialness of who we are, that lump of metal, that soul that we are. What is it? It's us. It's our core. It's our nature, and we want it to be in the best shape that we can. And so we put that lump of metal in the fire, we heat it up, and then we put it on the anvil, and we hammer it and we forge it into exactly what we desire, what we want it to be, what we need it to be. And that's what we're going to do on the Soul Forge podcast. We're not healing ourselves, we're not fixing ourselves, we're just making ourselves the best version of who we are. So that's basically it. That's how I came to the Soul Forge podcast title. So from here on out, we're going to get into some deeper, heavier things on the podcast. So with your interaction, that's definitely a requirement of the show. Please send me a message on any way that you would like. You can email the show, soulforgepodcast@gmail.com. You can write a note on Twitter, soulforgepod, or I guess at soulforgepod, if I should be accurate about it. And you can find me on Instagram at Darth Vaderloo, also on Twitter at Darth Vaderloo, and also like us on Facebook at Soulforge Podcast. Make a comment, start a discussion, tell your friends about us, share the links. Everything is definitely appreciated. So this is episode 4 of Soulforge, and I will talk to you next time. And remember, believe only half of what you see and nothing that you hear. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Soul Forge. I hope you found some value in it. To contact the show, please email soulforgepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at soulforgepod. We are Soulforge Podcast on Facebook, and you can find me personally on Twitter and Instagram at Darth Vaderloo. Please spread the Soulforge word by rating and reviewing us in iTunes and by telling everyone you know. Thanks for stopping by the Forge.